The casket was closed by the time he finally walked through the door, 3 days late, with sand still stuck in the soles of his shoes. I stood in the back of that funeral home and watched my brother check his phone before he even looked at our mother's photograph. My name doesn't matter right now. What matters is what I found in an envelope 4 days after we buried her. An envelope with my name on it, in her handwriting, hidden inside a coffee tin she'd kept on the top shelf of her kitchen for as long as I could remember. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start where it actually began. Our mother's name was Alina. She raised the two of us alone in a small house on Maple Street, working double shifts at a diner for 11 years after our father left without so much as a note. She never remarried. She never really rested, either, not until the cancer took the choice away from her. I was the one who sat with her during chemo. I was the one who learned how to change the dressing on her port, how to crush her pills into applesauce when she couldn't swallow them whole anymore. My brother, Daniel, called sometimes. He sent flowers once. He always had a reason. Work was busy. His girlfriend needed him. He'd come next week. Next week became 8 months. 8 months of watching our mother shrink into someone I barely recognized, her laugh growing thinner, her hands growing colder, while my phone stayed silent except for the occasional text from Daniel asking how she was doing, as if a text could stand in for a visit. She died on a Tuesday morning in April, just after 7. I was holding her hand. Her last words weren't dramatic, weren't the kind you see in movies. She just looked at me and said, "You were always the one who stayed." I didn't understand what she meant, not then. I called Daniel from the hospital hallway, my voice breaking apart with every word. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said he was sorry, that he'd catch the next flight out, that he just needed to sort a few things first. The funeral was scheduled for that Saturday. I handled everything. The flowers, the obituary, the caterer, the endless phone calls to relatives who hadn't spoken to our mother in years, but suddenly wanted to know the details. I did it all with a hollow ache in my chest, the kind of grief that doesn't cry. It just sits there, heavy, refusing to move. Daniel texted me Thursday night, running a little behind. "Will explain when I see you." I remember staring at that message for a long time, feeling something cold settle in my stomach. Explain what? What was there to explain about coming home for your mother's funeral? Saturday came. The chapel filled with people who loved her, old coworkers from the diner, neighbors who remembered her bringing over soup when they were sick, my Aunt Ruth crying quietly in the second pew, and an empty seat beside me, reserved for my brother, that stayed empty through the entire service. I gave the eulogy alone. My hands were shaking so badly I had to hold the podium to steady myself. I talked about her strength, her stubbornness, the way she used to hum old songs while she cooked, off-key and completely unashamed of it. I talked about the sacrifices nobody saw. I did not talk about the son who wasn't there to hear any of it. Afterward, standing by the casket as people filed past to pay their respects, I kept glancing toward the door. Some small, foolish part of me kept hoping he'd walk through it. Kept hoping there was a reason, a car accident, a missed flight, something forgivable. He walked in as the funeral home staff were preparing to close the casket for the final time. Sunburned, relaxed in a way that made my stomach turn. Wearing a shirt too casual for a funeral, the kind you'd wear somewhere warm, somewhere with sand and salt water. "Traffic," he said, like that single word could cover 3 days. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. I just looked at him, really looked, and noticed the tan line on his wrist where a watch usually sat, and the faint impression on his shoulder that looked exactly like a sunburn from lying on a beach chair too long. Aunt Ruth was the one who told me, 2 days later, over coffee in my kitchen, her voice low like she was confessing something. She'd seen it on social media. A photo Daniel's girlfriend had posted and quickly deleted. A beach in Cabo, a cocktail with a little umbrella. Daniel, shirtless, laughing, his arm around a woman who was not the mother of his children, was not anyone our family had ever met. Posted the same day, our mother took her last breath. I sat there with my coffee going cold in my hands, feeling something inside me crack open, not loud, not dramatic, just a quiet, permanent fracture, the kind that changes the shape of everything after it. I confronted him that weekend. I drove to his apartment, and I remember my hands trembling on the steering wheel the entire way, rehearsing what I'd say, knowing none of it would be enough. "You were on a beach," I said the second he opened the door. "While we buried her, you were on a beach with her." Daniel's face didn't even have the decency to look ashamed. "It was already planned," he said. "Non-refundable, and honestly, Mom would have understood. She always wanted me to be happy." "She wanted you at her funeral," I said, my voice cracking. "She wanted her son to say goodbye." "You said goodbye enough for both of us," he said. And then, quieter, almost bitter, "You always do." I left before I said something I couldn't take back. I drove home in silence, replaying his words over and over, feeling the weight of 11 years of quiet resentment finally rising to the surface. I thought that was the worst of it. I thought the pain of that empty chair, that ridiculous sunburn, that careless apology, was the deepest this could cut. I was wrong. 4 days later, going through our mother's things, I found the coffee tin on the top shelf of her kitchen cabinet, the one she used to keep spare buttons and old recipe cards. Underneath the buttons, wrapped in a plastic bag to keep it safe, was an envelope with my name written on it in her unmistakable handwriting. My hands were shaking as I opened it. Inside was a letter, dated almost a year earlier, written back when she'd first gotten her diagnosis, back before either of us knew how little time she had left. The first line stopped my heart. "If you're reading this, I need you to know the truth about your brother, and about what I'm leaving behind, before it's too late for either of us." I sat down on the kitchen floor right there, letter trembling in my hands, and I began to read words that would change everything I thought I knew about my family. My hands wouldn't stop shaking as I read. "If you're reading this, I need you to know the truth about your brother, and about what I'm leaving behind, before it's too late for either of us." I remember the kitchen light humming overhead, the smell of her old dish towels still hanging on the oven handle, and my own breath catching somewhere in my throat as I kept reading. "You've always been the one who stayed," she'd written. "Since you were 16 years old, taking care of your brother when I worked doubles. Since you were 20, helping me with rent when things got tight. I never told you how much I noticed because I didn't want you to feel like duty was the only reason I loved you. But I saw everything. I saw every sacrifice." I pressed my palm against my mouth, trying to hold in a sound that wanted to come out as something between a sob and a laugh, because of course she saw. Of course she knew. Mothers always know more than we think. The letter went on. "Daniel is a good man in some ways, but he has never learned how to show up. I've made excuses for him his whole life, and I think that's partly my fault. I let him believe that love could be long distance, that presence didn't matter as much as intention. I was wrong. I see that now, sitting here with this diagnosis, wondering who will actually be in the room with me at the end." My chest ached reading that line, knowing now, with certainty, exactly how right she'd been. "I've changed my will," she continued. "I know that might upset him. I know there will be anger, maybe even ugliness when this comes out. But I need you to know it was never about money. It was about who showed up, who held my hand during chemo, who sat with me in waiting rooms, who never once made me feel like a burden. The house is yours. Everything in my savings account is yours. Not because I loved him less, but because love, real love, has to be lived, not just claimed." I sat on that kitchen floor for what felt like an hour, letter resting in my lap, crying in a way I hadn't allowed myself to since the funeral, quiet, exhausted, grieving tears, the kind that come when a person finally lets themselves feel the full weight of everything they've been carrying. But there was more. One more paragraph, near the bottom of the page, that I read 3 times before it fully settled in. "There's a box in my closet behind the winter coats. Inside, you'll find something I've been saving for you for when you needed it most. I don't know when that will be. Maybe it's now. Maybe it's years from now. But I wanted you to have proof that someone saw you, that someone always saw you." I found the box that same night. Inside, wrapped in tissue paper gone soft with age, were photographs, dozens of them. Me as a child, holding her hand at the county fair. Me at 17, sitting beside her hospital bed the first time she'd had surgery, years before the cancer, holding a cup of ice chips because that was all I knew how to do for her. Me at my college graduation, the two of us laughing at some joke I don't even remember anymore. Underneath the photographs was a small journal, its pages filled with her handwriting, entries she'd written over years, quiet observations about my life, my choices, my quiet, unglamorous loyalty. Things I never knew she'd noticed. Things I never knew mattered to her as much as they clearly had. I called Daniel 2 weeks later, once the lawyer had officially informed him about the will. I hadn't wanted to be the one to tell him. Some small, tired part of me still didn't want to hurt him, even after everything. But he called me first, his voice sharp with disbelief. "She left you the house," he said. "The savings account, everything." "She explained why," I said quietly. "It's in a letter. I can send you a copy if you want to understand." "I don't need to understand," he snapped. "I need my mother's estate to be split the way it's supposed to be split. We're both her children." "We were," I said, and something in my voice must have carried the exhaustion of 11 years because he went quiet on the other end of the line. "But only one of us acted like it, Daniel. Only one of us was actually there." "It was one trip," he said, quieter now, almost pleading. "One mistake. You're going to let one beach trip define everything." "It wasn't one trip," I said. "It was 11 years of trips. 11 years of next week, of I'll call you back, of you'll understand. This was just the last one. The one she couldn't forgive because it happened while she was already gone." He didn't have an answer for that. There wasn't one to give. We didn't speak again for almost 3 months after that call. I kept the house. I kept her things exactly where they belonged, because moving them felt like erasing her all over again, and I wasn't ready for that kind of loss on top of everything else. Then, one evening in late summer, Daniel showed up at my door, unannounced, looking smaller somehow than I remembered him, not physically, but in some quieter, more honest way. His relationship with the woman from the beach trip had ended, he told me. "Something about the way people look at you differently," he said, "once they know what you're capable of walking away from." "I keep thinking about that eulogy," he said, standing awkwardly on the porch, not quite meeting my eyes. "The one I wasn't there for, I read it. Aunt Ruth sent it to me. You talked about her humming while she cooked. I didn't even know she did that." "She did it every single day," I said, "for as long as I can remember." He nodded slowly, and for the first time since the funeral, I saw something that looked almost like grief on his face. Real grief, not performance, not excuse. Just a man beginning, far too late, to understand what he'd actually lost. "I'm not asking for the house," he said. "Or the money. I know I don't deserve any say in that. I wanted to say I'm sorry for all of it. Not just the funeral, for all the years before it, too." I didn't forgive him completely that night. Forgiveness like that doesn't arrive all at once. It comes slowly, in pieces, the way grief does. But I let him in. I made 2 cups of coffee, and we sat at our mother's kitchen table, the same table where she used to hum while she cooked, and for the first time in longer than I could remember, we talked, really talked about who she was, and who we'd each become because of her. I think about her letter often now, about that line that stayed with me the longest. Love, real love, has to be lived, not just claimed. She never wanted to punish Daniel. I understand that now. She simply wanted the truth to be known, that showing up matters, that presence is its own kind of love letter, written not in words but in time, in patience, in the countless small moments nobody else ever sees. I kept her house. I kept her photographs, her journal, the coffee tin that once held nothing more than buttons and, eventually, the truth. And every time I walk into that kitchen now, I swear I can still hear her humming, faint and off-key, exactly the way she always did. She was right, in the end, about the two of us. I was the one who stayed. And in staying, I learned something I don't think I ever could have understood otherwise, that love isn't measured in dramatic gestures or perfect timing. It's measured in the ordinary days. The quiet ones. The ones nobody's watching. Those are the days that count the most.